Formal notice. Date: February 13, 2026. Section 1. Purpose and procedural status. This notice constitutes formal notice regarding a sustained and documented pattern of indirect public conduct, narrative distortion, and related actions that have caused substantial personal, professional, and reputational harm over multiple years. It is issued to Angels Kimmy, and I Gumdrop, Jamie, jointly and individually, in light of their respective roles in the conduct described herein. This notice is provided in good faith to establish a clear record of efforts toward resolution, define expectations for responsible conduct, and provide a final structured opportunity to resolve these matters prior to the initiation of civil litigation. This notice is issued in continuity with and without limitation of prior public statements and documented records concerning these matters. Nothing herein is intended to retract, modify, waive, or supersede any prior factual representations, positions, or preserved evidence. It is limited in scope to the matters described herein and is intended to provide formal notice regarding potential civil claims arising from those matters where prior informal efforts have been insufficient. This notice is supplemental and cumulative, not substitutive. It establishes the operative procedural framework and timelines going forward and replaces prior informal communications regarding scheduling and process without negating prior records, expressed intentions, or reserved rights. This notice is not intended for purposes of retaliation, public shaming, or reputational manipulation, but solely to facilitate responsible resolution and prevent further harm arising from ambiguity, indirect commentary, and unmanaged public narratives. Section 2. Factual background. For a period of time, Kimmy and I engaged in recurring direct communications through public live stream interactions and private messaging. These communications included personal and relational subject matter and occurred with mutual awareness. Over time, Kimmy's communications became inconsistent and contradictory despite my repeated efforts to seek clarity and stability. After directly communicating my concerns and boundaries in good faith, I withdrew from direct engagement when those issues were not resolved. Following my withdrawal, Kimmy's public statements and indirect commentary became a primary mode through which these matters were addressed. During this period, I continued to communicate directly through documented written communications directed to channels accessible to Kimmy and her representatives. These communications were directed toward clarification, accountability, and resolution. They did not result in sustained or meaningful resolution. The prolonged nature of these interactions, combined with significant disparities in public visibility, social influence, financial resources, and institutional support, made foreseeable the reputational, professional, and personal impact of public statements, omissions, and indirect commentary. During portions of this period, Jamie was involved in related communications, content, and public discussions concerning these matters and had contemporaneous knowledge of relevant interactions and developments. Section 3. Pattern of conduct. Over a period of several years, I have documented a recurring pattern of conduct, including but not limited to A. Indirect and implied public statements and behaviors that misrepresented my intentions, character, and conduct. B. Sustained engagement in conduct reasonably foreseeable to cause emotional distress. C. Failure to engage in clear, direct, and responsible communication regarding matters of personal, professional, and reputational significance. D. Ongoing avoidance of direct accountability while continuing behavior with harmful effects. These statements and behaviors were frequently issued within short time frames of my communications and addressed materially similar subject matter in ways reasonably foreseeable to influence audience perception. The pattern reflects sustained awareness of my communications and circumstances and a continued choice to engage indirectly rather than through clear, direct, and responsible dialogue. This conduct was not isolated. It was recurrent, cumulative, and persistent. Section 4. Impact and resulting harm. This pattern of indirect engagement contributed to the formation and reinforcement of public narratives portraying me as dishonest, harmful, inappropriate, or acting in bad faith, while omitting or obscuring relevant context regarding our interactions and communications. These narratives were reasonably foreseeable to cause, and did cause, substantial reputational, professional, and economic harm, as well as severe emotional distress. The persistence of ambiguity and indirect commentary enabled ongoing mischaracterization and deprived me of meaningful opportunity to correct the record or resolve underlying issues responsibly. These harms were exacerbated by the monetization and amplification of such content through large public platforms. These harms also include unauthorized or impersonation-based online content associated with my identity, which has contributed to confusion, reputational distortion, and economic impact. Section 5. Evidence. I have preserved extensive contemporaneous records, including transcripts, time-stamped recordings, archived content, indexed timelines, and correspondence records. These materials document the chronology, content, and cumulative impact of the conduct described herein and have been maintained in organized and verifiable form. Section 6. Differentiation of responsibility. Kimmy's conduct constituted the primary source of sustained narrative formation and indirect engagement relevant to these matters. Jamie's conduct, while differing in form and frequency, materially reinforced and contributed to these effects. Accordingly, expectations for accountability and resolution reflect the distinct roles and responsibilities of each party. Section 7. Framework for resolution without litigation. Resolution without litigation requires demonstrable, verifiable, and good faith action directed toward accountability, correction of harm, and prevention of recurrence. Generalized statements, reputation management messaging, partial acknowledgments, informal expressions of regret, or communications made through third parties, associates, intermediaries, indirect references, or informal channels, whether public or private, will not be considered sufficient. Engagement in form without corresponding substantive good faith conduct will not be deemed compliance with this framework. Any proposed resolution that relies primarily on confidentiality, non-disclosure, or private-only accountability without meaningful public acknowledgement of responsibility will not, by itself, be considered sufficient. Resolution must include reasonable financial compensation proportionate to documented reputational, professional, and economic harm unless expressly waived in writing. Financial consideration alone will not be regarded as sufficient absent substantive accountability, corrective action, and preventative measures. Section 7.1 Requirements applicable to both parties. Meaningful accountability must include, at minimum, a. Clear and specific acknowledgement of conduct that contributed to harm, including identification of material misrepresentations, omissions, or misleading implications. B. Acceptance of responsibility without minimization, deflection, recharacterization, or attribution of fault to third parties. C. A public corrective statement addressing the relevant factual and contextual issues in a manner reasonably calculated to mitigate reputational and professional harm. D. Cessation of indirect, ambiguous, or misleading public commentary relating to these matters. E. Preservation of all relevant records, communications, and materials. F. Written commitments to refrain from retaliatory, dismissive, or misleading conduct concerning these matters. G. Consistency between public representations and any communications made in connection with these matters. H. Implementation of reasonable measures to prevent recurrence of similar conduct. Public statements will not be considered retaliatory or improper where they are direct, specific, and demonstrably made in good faith. Section 7.2 Requirements specific to Kimi. Given Kimi's central role in the events at issue, meaningful accountability further requires a. Issuance of a clear, unambiguous public statement correcting prior mischaracterizations, omissions, or misleading implications. B. Transparent clarification of prior ambiguous or contradictory positions, especially regarding the nature and limits of future interaction. C. Demonstrable engagement directed toward substantive resolution rather than containment or reputation management. D. Conduct reasonably reflecting awareness of the professional, reputational, and personal consequences of past actions. Section 7.3 Requirements specific to Jamie. Meaningful accountability from Jamie further requires a. Truthful disclosure of relevant knowledge, participation, and communications. B. Non-interference with corrective and resolution efforts. C. Cooperation with reasonable measures directed toward clarification, mitigation, and prevention of further harm. D. Commitment to responsible and non-misleading public conduct concerning these matters. Section 7.4 Resolution Process and Scope. Any resolution framework must a. Define specific corrective actions, timelines, and deliverables. B. Provide for verification of compliance. C. Establish a reasonable completion period. D. Avoid provisions designed to obscure accountability, suppress legitimate disclosure, or perpetuate ambiguity. E. Preserve the right to pursue formal remedies in the event of material noncompliance. F. Provide for reasonable advance review and good faith consultation regarding any public corrective statements prior to publication. Section 8. Prohibited responses. The following will not constitute good faith resolution. A. Reliance on silence, especially but not limited to in combination with continued indirect commentary. B. Generalized narratives of misunderstanding without correction. C. Framing accountability as personal attack. D. Reputation management statements lacking substantive engagement. E. Conditional acknowledgments tied to withdrawal of claims. Section 9. Mediation option. I remain open to structured mediation with a neutral third party, subject to mutually agreed terms and timelines. Participation must not constitute waiver of any rights or claims. Agreement to mediate must be accompanied by concrete proposed dates and a mediator selection process within 14 days of the initial response. Mediation must occur within 45 days of mutual agreement with representatives possessing full settlement authority and must be conducted in good faith and not used for delay, discovery, reputational positioning, or strategic exhaustion. Section 10. Response deadline and consequences. A substantive response must be provided within 21 days of issuance of this notice, no later than March 6, 2026. A substantive response must meaningfully address the matters outlined herein and demonstrate a genuine willingness to engage in the accountability and resolution framework described in this notice in accordance with Section 7. Failure to provide a timely, substantive response or provision of a response that does not meaningfully satisfy these requirements will be treated as refusal to resolve these matters outside litigation and will result in initiation of formal legal proceedings without further notice, including pursuit of discovery, compulsory process, and related judicial remedies. Internal review, consultation, or approval processes do not toll or extend this deadline. Section 11. Potential claims. Absent resolution, I am prepared to pursue available legal remedies, including but not limited to claims for A. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. B. Defamation and false light. C. Civil conspiracy. D. Interference with prospective economic advantage. E. Related causes of action. This notice is not a waiver of any rights, claims, or remedies. All rights are expressly reserved. Litigation is not my preference. It is a last resort. However, I am prepared to pursue it fully, including through trial if necessary. Section 12. Preservation of evidence. All relevant documents, communications, recordings, social media content, and related materials, including but not limited to metadata, must be preserved. Destruction or alteration may result in additional legal consequences. Section 13. Closing. This notice reflects a well-defined and structured good faith effort to resolve serious documented harm through a formal accountability and resolution framework. Continued reliance on ambiguity, indirect narrative formation, or procedural delay will result in formal escalation. This position follows sustained and documented efforts over multiple years to seek clarity and resolution through informal means that proved insufficient. This notice represents the final opportunity I am extending for resolution prior to the initiation of litigation. Sincerely, Bronson Aslan. A formal PDF version of this notice was transmitted to the relevant parties prior to this publication.